Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Christensen. Welcome to Horror 101 with Dr. AC, and this is Scare-A-Thon 2023, benefiting the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. We're about halfway through the month. If you'd like to make a donation, the link to donate is right below in the description of this video. And tonight, we are here to talk about Watcher from 2022, starring Maika Munroe. And here to talk to me about this amazing little movie is my awesome panel consisting of Adam Rockoff, Mackenzie Parker, Stephany Perez, Ashley Lamers, and Cati Glidewell, aka the Blonde in Front. And we are going to be chatting about Watcher from 2022. Adam, I remember when we were talking about these, you said that Watcher was your favorite film from last year. Is that correct?
Not only is it correct, it's actually, and I know this sounds a bit like hyperbole when I'm going to say it, but it's my favorite film of the century, of the 21st century. I love everything about it so much. In fact, one of the nice things about these panels is we get to praise these films. I'm actually more interested to see if anybody could possibly say something negative about it, because I just can't imagine what could that be. That's how big a fan I am of it.
Awesome. Let's bounce over to Mac.
I saw this movie about a year ago when it premiered on Shudder, and coincidentally, the day before, I happened to watch Somebody's Watching Me. John Carpenter's Somebody's Watching Me. Literally the day before, I was like, I think I'll watch that movie because I've never seen it before. And then the next day, I was like, I'll check out Watcher on Shudder because I've heard that's really good. And I could do a parallel essay on those two movies for sure.
I love theme nights. Stephany.
This was such a 180 to I already forgot what it's called.
The Sadness.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking about you while I was watching this. I'm like, okay, maybe we can make it up to Stephany with Watcher.
Oh yeah, this film was so beautiful. It was so deep. It's got a lot to praise.
Let's jump up to Ashley.
Yeah, I didn't watch it until last night, first time, and I was really, really taken by it. I thought it was beautiful. I thought the story was fantastic. Super into this one.
And Cati.
I want every single stitch of wardrobe that Maika Munroe is wearing in this film. I know that sounds crazy, but as soon as I was done, I looked up the whoever did the costuming and everything. And I think this is her strongest performance since It Follows, if not stronger than It Follows.
I agree. And I'd forgotten that. I knew the name and I was like, why do I know Maika Munroe? And now like, oh, it's the It Follow girl. And boy, she just steps it up a notch. But she's also done, a few things since then. She's done Villains, The Guest. So she's working up a nice, genre resume for herself. I feel like I'm obliged to go back to you, Adam. Tell me how you came to this film for the first time.
There's no good story. I, as a subscriber of Shudder, I religiously check every day to see if there's a new movie coming out. There was Watcher, which I had, I don't even know if I really had heard anything about it, good or bad, but, it was a new movie I'd never seen. So I gave it a shot. And, I do like it more every time I watch it. But the first time I watched it, again, still blown away.
I also liked it the second time around or watching it this time than my first time around. It does get better with viewings.
Well, the basic premise is that Maika Munroe plays Julia, who she goes to Romania with her husband, Francis, and he has gotten a job there, and she does not speak Romanian. He does, and so she's kind of at his, in terms of needing him around to kind of translate so that she can navigate this strange world. And she starts to, her first night, she looks over and she can see somebody kind of like watching from the building next door. But then she starts to feel like this person may be actually following her throughout Romania. Just kind of like shows up at movie theaters and grocery stores and things like that. And that kind of paranoia, or is it paranoia if it's actually happening, that paranoia starts to grow. Ashley, you said that a lot of things were speaking to you about it. You mind kind of kicking things off?
Yeah, I loved the idea. There's that old saying, like, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean you're wrong.
Right.
And that really stuck out to me. And there were like little details. The overall piece of not being believed or taken seriously when you're afraid and when you notice things, especially as a woman. But then the smaller pieces of where she couldn't then be intimate with her partner because the fear was just in her body. It felt very, very relatable.
I think they really did do a good job with the going back and forth of, is she just paranoid? Because even I, obviously, like, I'm on, like, from the moment I see her, like, I'm on her side. That's who I want to believe. But there were even some moments where I was like, oh, is she making this up? Is she feeling super overwhelmed by being in a new place?
This is one of 2022 to me was the year that I call listen to the woman movies. It's like Watcher, Resurrection, Midnight. It's all of these women who are giving valid reasons why they need to be listened to. And it's like, oh, you're paranoid. Oh, you're just being, you're in a new city. We just don't understand you. Don't be silly. All that stuff. And this one, of those three, this one is just so beautifully stylized with everything about it. The direction, the cinematography. I mean, like I said, the wardrobe, but especially her performance, because what she does with her facial expressions, where she's scared, but she's not overly projecting that. And it's like that worried look and paranoid. And it also says a lot, the fact that the guy who's the Watcher, it's not like he's this menacing creature or something, like, but that doesn't matter. Like, when you're in a movie theater and someone's right behind you and then they follow you, it's like, those aren't coincidences. And the fact that it takes her like so much to try and get this out to people, like, listen to what I'm saying, like, this isn't normal, is just done so well. I will like bow down and watch anything that Chloe Okuno does from here on out, because I think honestly, this was like I think touching on genius from what I expect to see from her from now on.
Yeah, I did want to make mention of our writer-director, Chloe Okuno. I didn't know anything else that she'd done. I'd seen the one piece that she did in the VHS movie that kind of kicks that one off, but it's nothing like this film at all.
Yeah.
Like, that one's kind of a goofy found footage, and this is very stately, elegantly filmed. Great sense of place and isolation, and it was interesting because I'm watching kind of what you were saying, Adam. Like, does anybody have anything bad to say? I was kind of like, well, for the first hour, I was kind of like, is this a horror movie or is this just kind of like a mystery? And I'm fine with, because it was so well done. I was kind of like, I wonder if this is actually going to turn into a horror movie at some point. Answer, it does. But it was really kind of fascinating to be going along for the ride and going, okay, I'm waiting to see how this goes. It's funny you mentioned, Mackenzie, that somebody's watching me, because that's another one, it's made for TV. So there's not a lot of like outright horror in it. It's a lot of suspense and a lot of like, is this happening? Is this not happening? And can I please get someone to believe me?
I watched it both times thinking about, this probably affects women in a way that it doesn't necessarily affect men as much. I to say something bad about the movie, it's like Adam was, I the first time I watched it, I remember thinking like, well, she thinks that it's Bern Gorman the entire movie, and then in the end, it is Bern Gorman, and like, and that was like the one negative thing. But this time around, I really felt like there was a purpose to that, because she's right from the beginning, and I think that's really interesting, and that all these people are giving her all these reasons why to not believe that it's Bern Gorman. And the whole time she's been right from the start. Like, all of her instincts were correct. Everything was pointed in that direction, and everybody else was wrong. And I love that about the movie now. Where in the first time around, I was kind of like, all right, why'd you build up all this suspense and make me question all this if it, but it ended up, it was a negative that became a positive the next time around.
Well, I think that puts us exactly in the protagonist's perspective, right? It's like they're like, "What? I was right all along." Like, and no one will believe me.
Yeah.
Adam?
Oh, I was going to say, I didn't want to move off of Chloe that quickly because going, just referring to something Katie said when she was doing, a laundry list of all the great things about this film. I had the same laundry list: cinematography, writing, acting, everything. But the point that I want to make is all of our favorite horror directors, if we go back and we look at their first films, some are good, some are just terrible, and a few are great. But this was her first film. This was the first film she ever did, and it is an absolute masterwork. To think that she was able to accomplish this, not having done any feature films before, it really is. It's extraordinary.
It's very Hitchcockian throughout the beginning of it. Just the first 2/3 of it, especially just the cinematography and the way. I always think of the shot when she's in the elevator, and as the elevator's going down, and Bern Gorman just stands there and watches, and it's just like that. It's just one of the most unsettling, chilling things I've seen, and there's no violence about it. There's no it's just a guy watching her go down this elevator, and it's so unsettling.
You talk about the elevator. For me, it's the train. Like,
oh yeah.
I mean, and that again is one of those things. Like, come on, Bucharest. It's not like Bucharestville. Like, this isn't a small town. Like, this is a major city in a pretty prominent country. Like, the chances of this happening it's not even fathomable. And it's like when they start talking and having that conversation, it's like my skin just tightens up. It's like,
what an amazing conversation that is too. It's so, because he almost gets you to believe him near the end, until the end. I think what gives it away is when he does the turn, and he's like, what I really want is an apology, and you're like, oh, okay, never mind. Then there's she's noticing the plastic bag, and you're kind of wondering what's going on there. But
just throw that up there just in case. I'm curious, what were some people's feelings about how Frances was receiving, how her husband was receiving? Because on the one hand, I was putting myself in his place and going, well, he hasn't seen it. The evidence isn't clear, and it is about her perception. And I could see him going, I'm back home, and I'm trying to, kind of get my roots here. I'm under a lot of pressure with my job. And I feel like, I felt like I was on his side as well, and going, he's really kind of doing his best. He seems like a sensitive, and that he's hearing her, but he's also not willing to just kind of immediately be on her side. And I'm curious how that went down with some people.
I feel like when his character started, he really was very level. Like, he was trying to be there for her and believe her. And then as it went on, it was like, this is just getting more and more unbelievable. And then he, said those magical words where he called her crazy. Yep. And every time that they were speaking Romanian in front of her, it just created that sense of like, you're not being sensitive right now. You're not being inclusive. And that feels super shitty. That by the time things wrap up in the end, and seeing him just traumatized and got some splatter on him, I was like, oh, yes, perfect. Like, you had me in the beginning, and then you just kind of fell into the mud, and I don't care for you anymore. So
yeah. What's interesting? Ashley just made me think of something, and I don't know why, but and it's something I didn't write down, and it's something that I didn't even realize, but it sort of ties into the husband not believing her, is that until the end, I mean, literally until the last few minutes of the movie, the killer Bert, he doesn't really do anything wrong. Certainly nothing illegal. I mean, he does, we just don't see it. Yeah. But from Julia's perspective, although we sympathize with her, although she's a wonderful character, she's this strong woman, we want to believe her. He doesn't do, I mean, he looks creepy, that's for sure, but he doesn't do anything, that you could point to and say, oh, that's actionable, or that's, that's wrong.
Well, and it kind of to what Frances says, it's like he lives in the neighborhood. Of course he's going to be around you. Of course you're going to see him, that's the kind of insidious thing about it, is that it is all too easy to explain away her fears. Going back to that train conversation, living in Chicago, I mean, Stephany, you can probably relate to this too, but like, the idea of like being on a train in a busy city, alone with somebody, it's not that outrageous. I've had way too many opportunities to have those conversations with people that you don't really want to have. If you ignore them, they're going to make themselves be seen. And when he comes over and sits right next to her, you're like, okay, how is she going to react to this? And she comes straight out and asks him, why have you been following me? And he answers. I love that. Like, that to me was I was like, he didn't deny it at all. He's like going, here's what I've been doing. And I thought that was fascinating. That was great.
When you were talking about the watcher guy doesn't do anything wrong until the very end, I just realized now that I feel like this is it's a millennial version of Rear Window and The Burbs, like spliced together, with that reveal. It's like, you had to go in the burner, you had to do this and like keep me going and all that stuff. I never thought about that before. It's like, yeah, that's right. He never really didn't, Wayne, and not that we saw anyway.
You had mentioned, being in Chicago and being on subway trains and things like that. This movie also, I lived in Russia for a few months, and it really reminded me of that, the sense of isolation, and because you don't know the language that everybody around you is speaking. And I really related to that sense of, there a lot of walls get put up around her as soon as she's in Bucharest. And a big one is that she can't turn to anybody except for her husband and express anything, without having to run into a language barrier of some kind. Even with the neighbor, they have miscommunications and things like that. And she's dismissive of what she's seeing and experiencing, because, oh, you're new in this country. It's just, it's just the way things are. And I related a great deal to that, because in Russia, there's a lot of that. You'd ask people about strange things that you're noticing, and they're like, it's Russia. And it's like, okay, I'll just let that go then.
I live in a smaller city. We don't have, we have buses, but we don't have trains. And so her being in the movie theater and the supermarket were more relatable for me. And leaving the movie theater, I was like, yeah, that's what you do. When she was in the supermarket and he was following her, I'm like, fucking charge him. Go up to him. What are you doing? What do you want? And of course, that would have ended the movie a lot sooner. But yeah, and I think, kind of speaking to your point, Mac, is that as a woman, seeing her go into Bucharest she's just on her own. She's just going out and doing the thing. Right from the beginning, I was like, God, she's like really brave. She's really strong. And then as we're going, it's like, well, is she kind of like losing it here? Is she being insensitive? Like, this guy's just kind of a quirky dude. And also feeling like, no, she's legit. Yeah, I don't know. It was, that character was just so fantastic to me. I found myself really, really like wanting her to be real.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the language barrier, and that she kind of is so often waiting to hear what's actually happening. And I worked with the deaf community, in theater for a while, and I would often find myself kind of like bridging the gap between the hearing people at the table and the deaf people at the table. And, there are times where you do just find yourself editing, be like, you know what, it's not important. That's not a big deal. I don't need to translate that. But then you're making that decision for them. And that can feel very frustrating for them, but it's also frustrating for the person who is forced to translate all the time. It's just because it gets exhausting. And that's why I related to what Francis was talking about, where he's just kind of like, it's a private joke. It's not something that we need to, I don't want to have to translate every single word. but at the same time, that makes you feel like a less loving partner. And it's a real struggle. And I was so like the nuance of that. I had so much respect for what Chloe was bringing to the table. So I was like, man, that's somebody who knows what that's like to live in that world of being on the outside, but also being the person who can bridge the gap and the responsibility that goes along with that.
That scene at the party with the where that happens, where they say like, oh, it's an office joke. That's the most uncomfortable scene of the entire movie to me, and that includes the scene where she's tied to the bed with the bag over her head. Like I couldn't stand to be in that situation, to have the person you love most lying to you clearly in that situation, a social situation like that.
And we get it right from the get-go, like the taxi ride, like he's obviously saying something, and you see the husband kind of like bristle at it, and you're like, oh, what did he say? And he's like, it's fine.
I think, and I actually wrote this down. I think I'll trademark it now. I wrote cinema of the mundane. I think that's another thing that Chloe does so well. I mean, if we all think about our favorite scenes, and some of us have named them on the subway, in the movie theater. My favorite scene is in the one in the grocery store. But all of them are just things where you go about your day-to-day life, and there's nothing ostensibly, horrifying or scary about it, but the way she wrings so much tension from doing that is, I keep saying, it's extraordinary. And it is. I just sound like a broken record, but it's true.
No, you brought up a good point. Like I thought one of the most tense scenes was when after she had her first day in Bucharest and she's walking around. And I have to say that amazing red sweater and plaid skirt. I'm telling you guys, I'm obsessed with these costumes. Like I wanted to buy everything.
I kind of want Bern Gorman's jacket.
I mean, it's not bad.
It's a cool jacket.
But she's coming home and going down the hallway, and you see her like slowly walking, and the doors open, and then it's dark inside her apartment, and you see that figure. And she's just standing there. And then the landlady comes in, it's like, la, 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 la. And it's the guy fixing the thing. And I'm like, God, it's so well done. I mean, we haven't even started the movie and know what's going on. And already it's like you're getting this premise. It's like, she's brand new. She doesn't know who's going to be in her apartment or who's going to be around the corner. And she's like just walking around, and some security guard starts yelling at her. She's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, bye. And it's just, I mean, it is beautifully done. One thing that when I did a review regarding this before, someone complained that when spoiler alert. All right,
hang on. All right, here we go. Spoilers. Okay. Here we go.
One of the complaints, or they said when she was cut, that there's no way she could have survived with that loss of blood. And my argument was was like, look, I've watched Yellowstone enough that I know that anyone can survive anything. It's not like it was a full jugular or artery or stuff like that. I mean, and she's an actress. That's the thing that we always forget, that I think a lot of people, it's like she is an actress. So
yeah, she wasn't spurting from that cut.
Yeah.
And that was, talking about our favorite scenes, that was my favorite, was when they were mirroring each other on the floor.
Oh man, so great.
It was so intimate and in such a horrible way that it just felt very powerful in such a simple, quiet way.
Well, and since we've got the spoiler banner up, I was like, holy shit, she's fucking dead.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, wow. And I've got this just little part of me. It's like, I wish she'd stayed dead, but I also don't, I like how it ended as well. And I was like, oh, fuck, you went there. You killed our hero like 10 minutes before the end of the movie.
Yeah.
But I'm right there with you, Katie. I was kind of like, I love the fact that he slashed it, because I was like, what? You can't do that. And I love the fact that she was like, I'm going to hang in there. And you're like, so, and in your head, you're going, okay, so he sliced the vocal cords. There's something going on there where maybe just got to the trachea. I was like, okay, maybe it wasn't the jugular. Maybe it was just right here in the trachea where she can't scream,
Like
but
Motel Hell.
it's not a lot of blood coming out. I'm like, yeah, Motel Hell. Exactly. So I was like, I just loved that whole thing. And I love the fact that, we get Chekhov's gun, literally. I was like, who thinks that gun's going to come into play? I do.
Yeah.
The fact that she was crawling for it, and then she didn't make it. And I was like, oh, that is ballsy. Well done. Well done. So I think we get it both ways. She actually dies, but then she comes back,
Oh yeah.
We get
and
our
she gives
cake and eat it too.
big middle finger stare to her husband and at the end, which is basically like, without her saying it, it's like, I want a divorce.
I did in fact tell you so.
I think the ending was my favorite. I feel like women end up being the victims a lot, and it would have, to have her die and have the husband and us feeling sorry, like, oh no, he lost his wife, but instead she got to have that big "fuck you, I told you so" moment. That really made me happy, more than I thought it would, because it's kind of, it's still like the good happy ending, and I'm not usually into those, but this one, I think it was well deserved. It was hard to root for the husband. Early on, he said, when she was talking about the guy at the grocery store, he said, or maybe he's just looking at the woman who's staring at him.
Right.
And then, of course, at the very end, after that big dinner conversation, he said, I'm just so tired. And I remember writing down, you're tired? Like, like she hasn't been able to sleep, she's everywhere she goes, she feels uncomfortable, and of course then she's almost murdered. So I think that character was definitely well done, both of them.
And I wrote that down with like where the watcher, rather the watched becomes the watcher. Like she is now staring out her window and watching to see when he comes out, and she is looking at him, and it's like there is that sense of how much power suddenly the watcher has. The character of Weber, like he has so much power that she can't live her life now. Like she is constantly looking over her shoulder, looking out the window, trying to make sure that she's safe. It's just there's so many layers and layers and layers.
Talk about ratcheting up tension too. That moment is so brilliantly shot where when she waves at him and nothing happens for a long time, and then it's not even in focus, it's out of focus in the background when you just see him slowly put his hand up, and it's like it's so chilling. It's so chilling.
He's just lonely.
Yep.
Yeah. Taking care of his old father.
Yep.
Well, and actually, I mean, kind of to referring back to the sadness that we talked about, like this idea of when people, people are lonely, and we get that, but that doesn't entitle them to impose themselves on other people. Just because you're lonely doesn't mean you get to decide, well, you and I are going to have a relationship now.
Yeah, and I felt that way about the husband. I understood that it was also hard for him, but when I realized that he was making jokes behind her back, like he didn't have to do that.
Yeah,
he can still feel like it's been hard for him, for his wife, him and his wife situation, but he didn't have to add on to the jokes at work. So that's when I really flipped on him.
Any last thoughts before we wrap up? Obviously, this is a fantastic movie and comes highly recommended from 6 boxes. So
the only thing I'll say, and it doesn't really have to do with this movie, is I went, I think it was just on Wikipedia, maybe it was IMDb, to see what else she has planned, Chloe Okuno. And it said she is, I can't believe I forgot this. I don't know if she's the writer or just the director or both of the Audrey Rose remake.
Oh,
cool.
Oh.
Hope she keeps her cinematographer. Her DP is amazing because that rainy cinematography, the wetness of everything is one of my favorite things about the movie. Just gorgeous. That texture is gorgeous.
And as long as she uses Claudia Bonilla, the costume designer, I'm going to be like all on board that. Oh, did I mention I like the costumes? Yeah, I did.
Well, it is funny because having only seen her found footage effort to see what she can do when she has a budget, when she has a team around her, and it kind of speaks to her ability to go into different styles. You know, she can do found footage, she can do classic Hitchcock. I'm really kind of excited. I'm waiting to see her do like a down and dirty road movie now. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Again, this is Scare-A-Thon 2023, benefiting the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. Again, please click on that link below in the description, make a donation. We are halfway through October, and we'd love to keep those funds rolling in. Thanks, everybody. We'll be seeing you again later on in October. And until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.